I said yes to one dinner with a widower because I thought it would be polite. That was all. One evening, one conversation, one meal with a man I barely knew. I had no intention of starting anything new at 63 years old. I had built a peaceful life for myself after years of learning how to be alone, but before that dinner was even over, Richard Hayes looked across the table at me and asked if he could see me again. And somehow, the most surprising part was not that he asked. It was that I wanted him to. My name is Clara Bennett, and I never expected a simple dinner in Charleston, South Carolina, to remind me that there were still parts of my heart I had never truly closed. Before I tell you what happened, I'd love for you to stay with me through this story. And if you enjoy these kinds of heartfelt journeys, take a moment to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always love knowing who is sharing these moments with me. 8 years after my divorce, I had become very good at being independent. Almost too good. I ran my own interior design consultation business, helping older homeowners redesign their spaces after retirement, after children moved away, or after life changed in ways they never expected. I spent my days helping other people create beautiful new chapters. The funny thing was, I was not very good at creating one for myself. My children loved me, my friends cared about me, my life was comfortable. But comfort and happiness are not always the same thing. There are quiet moments when the house feels larger than it used to, moments when you finish making dinner and realize there is nobody across the table asking how your day went. I told myself I enjoyed the peace, and I did. But somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that wanting companionship again was something I had outgrown. Then my friend Elaine called me one afternoon. "Clara, I want you to meet someone." I laughed immediately. "Elaine? No." She laughed back. "You didn't even ask who." "Because I know exactly where this conversation is going." She told me his name was Richard Hayes, a widower, a retired architect, a man who spent his retirement restoring historic homes and volunteering around Charleston. I almost declined. Not because there was anything wrong with him, because I knew myself. A dinner could become a conversation. A conversation could become hope. And hope, after you have been disappointed enough times, can feel dangerous. But Elaine convinced me to accept one dinner. One. That was my agreement. When I arrived at the restaurant, I expected awkward conversation and polite smiles. Instead, I found a man sitting quietly by the window, looking out at the street. Richard stood when he saw me. Not because he was trying to impress me, because he was raised that way. There was something steady about him. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and the kind of calm presence that made you feel like you did not have to perform. We started talking, and strangely, the conversation was easy. We talked about Charleston changing over the years. We talked about the houses he restored. We talked about my work helping people make their homes feel like theirs again. Then he asked me a question most people never asked. What part of your work do you enjoy the most? It was such a simple question, but I realized something. He was not asking what I did. He was asking what mattered to me. I told him I loved seeing people fall back in love with their own lives. Richard smiled. "I think that's a rare thing." "What is?" "Helping people believe there is still something ahead of them." I remember that sentence because, without realizing it, he was describing exactly what I needed to hear. Later that evening, he mentioned a community garden he was trying to save near his neighborhood. He explained that developers wanted to purchase the land. For most people, it might have just been a garden, but to Richard, it was a place filled with memories. Neighbors had celebrated birthdays there, children had played there, older residents had gathered there for years. He told me his late wife, Susan, had helped organize the original project. The way he spoke about her was different from what I expected. There was no bitterness, no sadness that demanded attention, just respect. I admired that, but I also wondered if there was room in his heart for someone new. By the time dessert arrived, I realized something uncomfortable. I was enjoying myself. And then Richard surprised me. He placed his coffee cup down and smiled. I hope this doesn't sound too forward. I waited. I would like to do this again. I laughed softly. Richard, you haven't even finished dessert. He smiled. That's true, but I already know I don't want this to be my only evening with you. I should have been nervous. Instead, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt noticed. Not because of how I looked, not because I was trying to impress him, because he was genuinely interested in me. After that night, things developed naturally. There was no rushing, no pretending we were 20 years old. You know, moments like this are exactly why I wrote my book, Confession of Unexpected Love. It is filled with heartfelt stories about unexpected connections, second chances, and the beautiful surprises that can find us later in life. It is the kind of book you can enjoy during a quiet weekend, while traveling, with a cup of coffee in the morning, or during those peaceful moments when you simply want a meaningful story to keep you company. If you enjoy stories about love, hope, and new beginnings, you can find Confession of Unexpected Love through the link in the pinned comment. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because I soon realized this dinner was only the beginning. We met for walks, conversations, and quiet afternoons where we discovered pieces of each other's lives. One day, Richard remembered something I had mentioned weeks earlier. I told him I loved old southern gardens because they reminded me of my grandmother. When we walked through the community garden, he pointed to a section filled with roses. I thought you would like this area. I looked at him. You remembered that? He shrugged. I listened. Those two words stayed with me, because after years of feeling like I was always the person remembering everyone else, it felt different to have someone remember me. But the closer we became, the more I noticed something. Richard was carrying something heavy. Not sadness, something closer to guilt. I learned the developers had increased their offer for the garden. Selling would have solved many problems. But Richard could not bring himself to walk away. At first, I thought it was because of Susan, and maybe part of it was. One evening, we sat on a bench inside the garden while the sun was going down. Richard was quiet. Finally, he said, for a long time, I thought moving forward meant leaving something behind. I looked at him. What do you mean? When Susan died, I felt like enjoying my life again would somehow mean I loved her less. That was the moment I understood. Richard was not stuck in the past because he loved Susan too much. He was afraid that a new happiness would dishonor an old one. And suddenly, I saw myself in him, because I had been doing the same thing. I had convinced myself that wanting love again meant admitting something was missing, but maybe it only meant I was still alive, still capable of caring, still capable of being cared for. Then came the part that frightened me. I began wondering if I was simply becoming a temporary comfort in Richard's life, someone who helped him move through grief, someone who would always stand beside a memory I could never compete with. I finally told him how I felt. I don't want to be someone's second choice. Richard looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. Clara, I am not looking for someone to replace my past. I am looking for someone to share my future. That changed everything. But our story was not finished. The community meeting about the garden was approaching. Richard had to decide whether to accept the developer's offer or fight for something he believed mattered. And I had to decide something too. Was I willing to stand beside someone publicly? Was I willing to let people see that I was beginning again? For years, I had protected my independence. But I realized independence was never supposed to mean isolation. So when Richard stood before the community and spoke about preserving the garden, I was sitting there beside him, not because he needed someone to save him, not because he could not stand alone, because I wanted to be there. The community eventually voted to preserve the garden. Months later, Richard and I sat together among the flowers we had fought to protect. We talked about ordinary things, plans for the weekend, places we wanted to visit, little details about tomorrow. And that was the beautiful part. It was not a dramatic beginning. It was something quieter, something better, a man who had lost love. A woman who thought her romantic story was already finished. Two people who discovered that life does not always bring us the same kind of love twice. Sometimes, it brings us something completely different, something we never knew we needed. Sometimes the most meaningful stories are the ones that remind us of something we already know, that life can still surprise us, that connection can still find us, and that love, in its many forms, can still bring warmth into our lives. That is the feeling behind my book, Confession of Unexpected Love. It is a collection of heartfelt stories about unexpected connections, second chances, and the moments that remind us we are never too old for hope, companionship, or a new beginning. It is the kind of book you can enjoy on a quiet evening before bed, during a peaceful weekend at home, while relaxing with a cup of coffee in the morning, or take with you when you travel and want a meaningful story by your side. For those moments when the house is quiet, when you want to slow down, reflect, and enjoy a story that touches the heart, Confession of Unexpected Love is waiting for you. You can find the link in the pinned comment. And if this story touched your heart, I would love for you to be part of this community. Please take a moment to like this video because it helps more people discover these stories. Subscribe to the channel for more mature romance confessions, second chances, and unforgettable love stories. And don't forget to turn on your notification bell so you never miss the next story. Thank you for spending these moments with me. I hope the next chapter brings you something beautiful.